everyone, as you join. My name's Christopher Hill, and I'm the editor of DestinAsian magazine. And today I'll be moderating a discussion about the challenges and opportunities facing sustainable travel in a post-COVID-19 world, which is hopefully not too far away. We're fortunate to have a fantastic lineup of experts with us this afternoon to share their insights into this crucially important topic. And I'll be reserving the last 10 minutes of this hour-long session for a Q&A, which viewers can participate in using the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So please stick around for that and send in any questions you might have, and we'll get back to you, as many of you as possible. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists. Starting in alphabetical order, we have Roy Ariel, who is the General Manager of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, or GSTC, a nonprofit accreditation group for sustainable travel headquartered in, I believe it's Washington, D.C. Is that correct, Roy?
Yes.
Roy himself is based in Taipei, but is joining us from Bangkok. Also in Bangkok is the inimitable Bill Bensley, the founder and creative director of Bensley Design Studio. Over the course of his career, Bill has had a hand in the architecture, design, and landscaping of some of the most imaginative hotels in Asia. He's also a hotelier in his own right with the Shintamani brand, which he and his business partner have developed in Cambodia over the last decade or so. Bill, always a pleasure to see you. Joining us from Singapore is Cher Chua Lasalvi, the co-founder and managing director of Batu Batu Tengah Island, an off-the-grid eco-resort situated on a small forested island off the east coast of peninsular Malaysia. Cher's primary focus is overseeing environmental programs and sustainable practices at Batu Batu, which, and here's a little plug for you, Cher, is due to reopen 15 of his 22 villas on July the 1st. So a bit of good news there. Back to Bangkok, I'm delighted to welcome William Niemeyer, who is the founder and creative and CEO of Yana Ventures, which owns and operates a collection of sustainable travel and hospitality ventures in Southeast Asia. And finally, we have my fellow Canadian, Jeffrey Smith, or just Jeff, the Vice President of Sustainability at Six Senses, a brand that has been on the forefront of environmentally and socially responsible hospitality since 1995, is that correct, Jeff?
I think 1996, but close enough.
Close enough, excellent. Well, thank you all again for joining us today. To start, not that anyone on this panel needs a definition of sustainable tourism, but I'll give one anyway. The World Tourism Organization defines it as tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the environment, and host communities. Or in other words, travel that serves as a force of positive influence on the environment, society, and economy of the places we visit. Yet, for all the good it can bring, and despite the great strides made by the sustainable tourism movement over the last decade or so, it remains a fragmented thing, with much of the industry in our immediate region still focused on volume and return on investment rather than mitigating the negative impacts that over-tourism and short-sighted destination management can bring. So, the main question I thought we'd address for the next 20 minutes or so is whether the current crisis has perhaps brought us to a turning point for sustainable travel. We've all endured a pause over the last few months, and has that provided an opportunity for everyone, from consumers and operators and governments alike, to reflect on our priorities and really rethink our approach to travel, to press the reset button, as it were? Or will it be business as usual as the industry scrabbles to recoup losses and capitalize on pent-up demand once people begin to travel again? And to look at it from another direction, will investment in sustainable practices such as single-use plastic elimination and lower energy consumption, will these investments be put on hold in the face of the tremendous financial challenges posed by COVID-19? Or will it be locked in as part of the solution to long-term corporate resilience, and indeed the ongoing climate crisis, which will be with us long after the pandemic subsides? Roy, can we start with you, and perhaps you can give us a short introduction to what the GSTC is all about before sharing your insights as to how you see things playing out.
Sure thing. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for listening in. So in short, the GSTC, which stands for the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, manages the GSTC criteria, which is the global baseline standards for sustainable travel and tourism. And we also act as the international body that provides assurance for sustainable tourism certifications in the three main subsectors of tourism, of hotels and accommodations, tour operators, agencies, and destinations. So let me share some thoughts on this topic. I think that the COVID-19 crisis definitely provides an opportunity for wide embracement of sustainability practices in the travel industry. But will actually governments and businesses take it? And can all of them have the same opportunity? And I think it's quite important to make a distinguish here and understand that we have many stakeholders that have been affected and responded differently to the crisis. While the private sector is indeed focused on survival at the moment with almost no cash flows and dwindling cash reserves, it makes small businesses more prone to the crisis, while larger businesses and chains are able to cut expenses and keep the vital organs operational in order to survive. And those that are operational in a number of countries, then perhaps one country, as we've just had a quick chat before, in Vietnam, the tourism industry is operational at the moment, the same in Taiwan and the same in a few other countries. They are able to offset the losses and keep surviving. On the other hand, we have the small businesses that really are being impacted, small businesses that operate in a local level. But putting aside the private sector, I can tell you from what we see at the GSTC that governments and destinations continue to operate and do take the opportunity that the crisis has given, and they continue to look ahead, and they continue to make plans and actually take action. That's because, of course, from financial perspective, they are capable. It means that they are government funded and the funding is not being much affected, at least this year. Perhaps next year, we will see the destinations and government organizations are being affected because of this year. I'll give two examples. One would be Japan, that formally adopted the GSTC destination criteria to enhance sustainability of tourist destinations in Japan as we speak at this moment. And another example from this region is that in April, the Tourism Authority of Thailand, TAT, the governor mentioned that the situation is an opportunity to improve and make sure that the tourism will be sustainable. And I have here the quote, "It can't go back to the way tourism once was here." So destinations are both saying things, but also take actions. These are just a few examples in Asia, and there are a few other countries and destinations, including in Europe and the Americas, that GSTC has been closely working with during the pandemic. But some of them prefer to remain a little bit more silent on this issue because at this moment, they understand that people are more concerned with issues related to health and safety. So their focus and their communication is more focused on that. This means that destinations will be promoting in the future more of those activities and services that are considered sustainable. And this is where the travel providers that are more sustainable will have a short-term advantage. Adding to that, we also did notice a wider pickup in interest in the GSTC criteria by hoteliers, tour operators, and other in the industries. And we run online courses, and the seats for them have been taken very fast. So we do see that quite a lot in the industry and in the public sector taking an advantage of this crisis. as I mentioned, the GSTC, besides managing the GSTC criteria, which is a baseline standard for sustainable and travel and tourism, we also act as an international body that provides assurance for sustainable tourism certifications. And in the previous DestinAsian virtual roundtable #2 about hygiene and safety measures, both Acre and Banyan Tree shared how they work with Bureau Veritas, which is a GSTC accredited certification body, specifically on the issue of health and safety standards and of course, certifying them. But it is very clear that the post-COVID-19 customers are already more sensitive to the questions if the travel provider adheres to these two specific standards, and can they prove it that they do adhere to it? And this is where the use of certification is quite important. So at the moment, we see it more strongly in the health and safety, but because customers are going to be a little bit more sensitive, then they will demand a little bit more from other travel and tourism providers to show their sustainability credentials as well.
Okay, excellent. Bill, would you care to take on that topic?
The topic being?
Well, the topic being, are we at a turning point for sustainability? Sustainable travel, or?
Are we at a turning point? No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think once this is all gone, everyone's going to go back to their old ways and keep on doing what they do.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate. That's pessimistic. But no light at the end of the tunnel whatsoever. I mean, you've worked on a number of very progressive properties throughout the region.
I think that people we have to, and I'm a big banger of the sustainability drum. And everything that we do in planning hotels, I'm an architect that designs hotels. Everything that we do is about sustainability. And in fact, I wrote a free white paper that I sent out to many hotel companies to put it within their building standards about sustainability. But Christopher, I think your question is COVID going to change the way that the world thinks about sustainability? Not in a big way, no. I can tell you that in my personal experiences with Shintamani Wild, and I think you've been there, yeah?
Yes, it's beautiful, yeah.
And I think that what we've done over this last 3 months or so is that we've haven't fired anybody from the staff. We have 120 people, and most of those people are from the village of Timorung. And we have now all of those people that were working in the hotel as butlers and maids, etc. Now they are working in the forest, because we found that since many people in Cambodia have been out of work, out of tourism, that there's more pressure on the forests of Cardamom National Forest. There's more pressure. There's more people laying traps, etc. There's more people trying to burn parts of the forest. There's more people trying to cut down the forest. So I've taken some of the staff that we have and put them to work as patrolling. So that's to put out fires. And then we've taken other parts of the staff, and that they're building, now they finished our compost heap. We've got a huge compost heap. We've got a great on-site shredder. Now we've built a chicken house, and we've started a huge vegetable garden. So it's all those things that we wanted to do, but COVID has given us the time now in order to do it. So in a very small way, COVID's helped us with sustainability. So maybe that answers your question, Christopher?
Sure. Well, that's good, and we'll return to Shintamani Wild later in the discussion. But for now, Cher, could you pick up on the conversation?
Yeah, sure. I think.
Is Bill right? Is it business as usual as soon as we get through COVID-19?
Well, I think there is a risk, right? But there's a lot of talk, especially in the sustainability circles. And I think, like, I live in this echo chamber of sustainable tourism and stuff. Like, my LinkedIn is all about using this pause and how we're all going to come out better and how everyone demands more. But I see a little subsect of tourism, right? And I don't know what percentage the panelists are as a percentage of the tourism industry as a whole.
Indeed.
I think that's one big thing. Two, I think that there are some big risks, right? Tourism has suffered really badly. People have run out of cash. People are in desperate need of money. And I've seen Malaysia's reopened domestic tourism, like with 3 days notice. And everyone said about trying to work out how to bring tourists. And there are offers out there for 50% discounts on all hotel rooms and destinations, and it's terrifying because you need to have double the volume to get the same revenue back, right? So it seems like an interesting and slightly scary tactic to deal with recovery. And then, of course, there are concerns around kind of pandering to the demands of guests because you're so desperate to take business, right? So that's in the nature tourism space. But I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think there are some COVID SOPs, the new normal health and safety SOPs, like social distancing, that will help take pressure off. Like yesterday, we were talking with our local district council about how they're going to deal with tourist boats. And they're going to halve the number of guests allowed on a boat or on any tourist boat to allow for social distancing. But that's for social distancing. I know it's a small point, but it makes a difference around us because we're these islands. And one of the risks at the moment is that snorkel day tripping has increased from 0 to 80 operators in the last 3 years, right? And there was concern about how brakes would be put on that. And it's also a political decision from government because they don't want to take away rice bowls. So I think there might be some upshot, but I think a lot of it is going to boil down to the will of whoever is leading whichever enterprise or company making that decision, right? And I think a lot of people won't go the sustainability route. It might not be on radars or it might not be a priority.
Have you heard anything in Malaysia similar to what the quote that Roy gave us from the Tourism Authority of Thailand, or was that the governor, Roy? I forget. But
yeah,
on that sort of government level, has there been any discussions about, you know, re-engineering tourism to any degree? Or
Malaysia already has a 10-year ecotourism plan, right, which identifies 60 clusters across the country, and it's quite a well-written plan by someone very credible, and it makes sense. This is the second 10-year plan because the first one wasn't implemented, and we are 4 years into the second plan, and basically the second plan starts off with why the first plan didn't work. So it's got to be both ground up and bottom up and top down, right? We have to meet in the middle. So there are bits of the Ministry of Tourism that are funding it and that are interested in it. We've got a destination coordination group on ecotourism in our area, which has been going now for a year. And that's to put in, actually, we're using the GSTC destination criteria as a guide and working across government and private sector and community to try and put a plan, a 5-year plan in place to protect the area. And government is massively supportive of it, but on the other hand, they're still putting out KPIs on volume. So how, maybe they're people who sit on different floors of the same building, you know. But there is, and state government are mandating someone who's very deeply into sustainable tourism. Well, they haven't mandated him yet, but it's on the cards to mandate someone to write the recovery plan for the area, the tourism recovery plan. So that's a huge step forward to bring someone in who is knowledgeable in sustainable tourism and will push those agendas. But still to be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. What about you, Willem? What are your predictions? What are you seeing out there?
Well, it's interesting. We are just looking, and we have a couple of companies under Yana Ventures, some small eco lodges in Thailand and Cambodia. We are a neighbor of Bill's, actually, protecting the same Cardamom mountain area. We are all in southern Thailand, but we also are I would say, our 800-pound gorilla, which has slimmed down to maybe 250 in the last couple of months, is a DMC. And what is interesting is that we have actually quite a lot of our clients still as business on the books, even for next month. It's not even a pent-up demand. These people have not canceled. They're just waiting for the government on either side to allow travel to go on. So yeah, that kind of points in the direction that we are heading in business as usual, if you will. But I am, that being said, I'm still positive, because I think business as usual over the last 5 years or so, maybe a little bit longer, has definitely moved into the direction of more sustainability and more responsible travel. It's the reason why our 2 small lodges are doing very, very well since opening. It's probably a reason why Bill invested in his property in Cambodia. So I'm positive of the general direction of tourism. But post-COVID will not change much. I think there's the pressure of the normal business pressure, supply and demand. There's an enormous amount of supply, and that needs to be filled up. And yeah, then you get people dropping the price for different reasons, by the way. We are dropping our price in our 2 small lodges, but it has more to do to get our staff back, you know, energized and getting back to work, because it's very, very demotivating to have no customers whatsoever. And our first month or 2 months will in any case be the domestic market. So it's a little bit of a moot point, and it's proven in Vietnam actually that that's the first market. And likely a little bit less profitable, we'll see. Yeah, I think we all hope that international market come back.
Absolutely. Okay. Last but not least, Jeff, perhaps you could share with us what Six Senses has as its roadmap for future sustainability efforts.
Sure. I mean, I'll start by saying I think there's definitely some shift already, not talking about sustainable tourism, but sustainability in general. Definitely COVID has, it's provided a very unfortunate situation, but it's proof of concept for things that previously people would have scoffed at. You know, can we drop globally, can we drop CO2 emissions by 25%? But we've done it, not in the way that anyone would want to, and I'm not advocating this is the way to do it, but we've definitely proven that it's possible. And for tourism, I do think that when people start traveling again, I think there'll be a shift, but I don't think it's new. I think there's pre-existing trends for people already, and this is something that we're very much aware of at Six Senses, is that even before COVID, there was a trend towards what some hotel people were calling purposeful travel, or in the past, maybe it was, you know, people traveling for, you know, to volunteer and do things like that, to get involved, to make a difference in the world. So I do believe that coming back after COVID, that's going to play a continuingly important role in the motivation for people to travel, especially now. And it's not going to just change like that overnight either. It's a hassle, right? There's more lineups in the airports. There's more screening. There's, depending on your personal thoughts around COVID, you're exposing yourself to risk even by going to the airport. So to be motivated to go through that process of traveling, I think people will need a compelling argument to travel. And I think more and more a role that will be, you know, in promoting that will be sustainable tourism. I think people will need a purpose to travel even more. And I think it will play a bigger and bigger role. You mentioned in the question, Chris, you asked about investment too. I think that there's tons of studies out there showing that, in the larger investment world, investments in ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, has played an increasingly important role in investment decisions. And throughout COVID, that gap has widened, not reduced. So despite, I understand the concern, and it seems like a logical question to ask, will people not spend on sustainability because all of a sudden they just need to fight to survive? But certainly in investment circles now, and I don't mean hypothetically, I mean the data is showing that right now, more people are investing in ESG indexes and environmental, social, governance backed investments than they are in traditional investments today. So that's the impact that we're already seeing from COVID in investment. Specifically on travel, and I think what's yet to be seen is the COVID response from operators and hotels and even governments is, and I'm a little nervous about this, is, personal protective equipment, gloves, testing kits, face masks. Is the world going to go crazy on single-use plastic again? I think that's yet to be seen, and I'm a bit nervous about that, but I do hope that we will find some sanity, that we'll realize that wearing plastic gloves doesn't actually make you safer. So to give some careful thought to how we're reducing risk in a safe and a smart way. So specifically Six Senses and what's happening with us. Interesting points from Bill with his team getting back and more involved in forest protection. For us, all of our Six Senses properties have gardens, and right from the get-go, when we started reducing our guest numbers, I started pushing our teams to get into the gardens more. So that's been very positive, and it's something that we're doing a lot of. Many of our gardens are now actually producing a surplus of produce, and we're gifting those to local communities. So that's great. And the turnout in our gardens has been the best it's ever been, because we have staff who, we don't have guests. So staff are showing up for that garden training or getting involved and helping with the planting and the harvesting. So that's been fun. And yeah, to also just kind of echoing Willems' points about domestic tourism, that's definitely something we're seeing. It's definitely domestic first for the comeback, and that's what we've been seeing in our Vietnamese properties. That's what we've seen in China, and that's what we're planning for really all of our properties coming back. And I think that could play not just part of the recovery process, but moving over the next couple of years. I think people might be traveling more domestically. People might be putting more thought and care into planning their travel vacation. Again, because of the potential or perceived risks involved, but also because of the costs, and maybe people will travel less frequently, but travel better. And I think that can only be good for sustainable tourism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay, well, moving on, I think my next question has kind of been answered in a few different ways so far, but I wanted to focus in on destination management itself. And of course, we've seen a few good examples of how low volume, higher yield models can work for everyone's benefit in places like the Galapagos and Bhutan, where visitor numbers are kept deliberately low. In the Southeast Asian context, is there any room for that? Is anyone aware of any discussions? I know we mentioned Thailand earlier and touched on Malaysia, but is anyone aware or privy to any other discussions taking place among destination marketing organizations on that sort of level? Roy, maybe you have some insights?
Yes, I'll also share. So we like to say the sentence quality over quantity, and it has the merit when speaking about tourists at the destination, of course. But there is actually a wide range of models to manage a destination's capacity before reaching the option of strict limitation on visitor numbers, such as the example of Bhutan you provided. And I think I'd like to stress the important idea of visitors dispersion. So now actually it's a perfect opportunity to promote secondary and tertiary destinations where visitor dispersion is to such destinations. And it's actually what many sustainable tourism professionals promoted to counter over-tourism over the past few years. And ironically, this proves, in a way, a recovery from the COVID. So a recovery from under-tourism might actually allow to push these emerging destinations to be more prominent and disperse the tourists more evenly within a country to wide array of destinations. And I think Kiri Travel prides itself in taking visitors to locations less traveled, such as none in northern Thailand. And I know of 6 Senses resorts are located in less known islands. For example, in Thailand, I know one is in Koh Yao Noi and Koh Kud. And these are definitely off the radar for the first time or even the second time visitors in Thailand. So this is really important to prevent going from under tourism to over tourism, is to really understand this dispersion model. If destination, so DMOs, many times we speak about DMOs, and some refer to DMOs as destination marketing organizations, which is traditionally what it is, but we hope that more and more refer to it as destination management organizations. So many destinations are just not being managed at all. They are being marketed, but they are not being managed. And without the proper management of a destination, there's no way to understand carrying capacity and provide this. So at the moment, there are some discussions in Thailand about closing of certain national parks for a few months, right? But the thing is that it's not necessarily that it needs to be closed down. It needs to be just managed more on a long term, on a day-to-day, in a more proper way. So instead, for example, instead of closing down a place for 2 months or a year, you can just make sure that the amount of people that arrive is smaller, or they can only, they're only being allowed to visit certain areas that are they have less effect on the natural environment. Another option, of course, is to play with timing or use flexible pricing, where, for example, this has been done in a number of places, I think also in a few cities in Europe, where if you like to visit a very popular site, it's going to be more expensive to visit it during the peak hour. So, and then if you want to visit in when less people are there, it's costs less. So it actually, there are a lot of models that can help with that, but really there isn't much pure discussion on that. It's just another thing along the sustainability, but I don't see a huge focus on that at the moment by destination management or destination marketing organizations.
Okay. Next question is, how can the industry itself work together in a better or more collaborative way to get the message out? Shara?
Who are we getting the message out to?
Well, getting the message out, I suppose, to the public, you know, for consumer sentiment.
Yeah. Not my specialty, because we are really so small, and we have a niche market. So as I say, we already live in this echo chamber, right? Which is people who look for our kind of product. In terms of we have a biodiversity NGO, and we have and we're working on a destination management organization for sustainable travel in Mer Sing, which is the southern Johor Islands off the east coast of Malaysia. People are starting to hear about it in town. So it's really interesting because the community that we work in they're not in this echo chamber at all. Sustainability, why, you know, I need I need to feed my families. My children need to go to school. So we're looking at getting the messages out in that direction, and looking at ownership of biodiversity and the environment in our area. And I think that has actually interestingly got quite a lot of attention. Tourism kind of driving that is actually quite interesting to the outside world, despite the outside world not necessarily being our target market, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Anyone else? If not, let me move to another question. And this is open, but I think, Bill, this one might have your name on it. And that is from a design and operational perspective, for that matter, how do you see, or how would you like to see hotels and resorts evolving from now on? And I'm not quite sure. I'm aware of your much vaunted, much reported on human zoo project in China. Perhaps that dovetails into this conversation in some way.
Well, I feel strongly that every single hotel that's built from now on should have a purpose, a real strong purpose, and about conservation or environmentalism, or great management of sustainable resources, or management of wildlife. It has to have, or even if it's just supporting the orphanage next door. I think that every single hotel company should begin to embrace an attitude which is just a little bit beyond themselves now. And if we all did that as a group of hotel industry, we all begin to be able to think about what's beyond the bottom line, even if it's just a little bit. I think that's going to help us tremendously. To answer your question about the human zoo, it's not really a human zoo. The idea came to me because of the poaching that's happening in the Cardamom National Forest, and Willems knows very well that a lot of that trade goes to Vietnam. The dead animal, wild animal trade goes to Vietnam, goes to China. And about 2 years ago now, a wonderful client of mine came to me and says, "Kunbil, we want to make a zoo." And I said, "Oh shit, I don't really like zoos, no? But let's think about this, how we can turn this to our advantage." So it's a huge piece of property, and I said, "Okay, we'll make a zoo of sorts if 95% of the property is about animals roaming free." And then I went to see all of the zoos in China. And that's not a pretty picture. So that there's an overcrowding and so forth. So we found out that there's a lot of zoos that would like to take this opportunity to release their animals in the right way. So again, going backwards, we have 95% of this land, a big, huge piece of land, something like 3,000 hectares, is for animals to roam free without predators. This is the key, without predators. And 5% of the land is around the periphery of the site is for hotels to look onto the reservation whilst they're contained. There's no safaris or vehicular traffic through the reservation. And that, I hope, it has the potential to influence millions of young Chinese in order to be able to understand that perhaps wildlife is not the thing to eat. It's as simple as that.
Right. Right. Okay. Brilliant. I look forward to visiting one of these days.
Me too.
Indeed. And what about you, Jeff? What do you see in terms of the future of sustainability design trends or operational trends again at hotels? What do you see on the horizon? I mean, the last 2 years, 3 years, we've seen a lot of the elimination of single-use plastics, you know, which was a movement that once it took on momentum, it moved very quickly through the industry. What is after that?
Yeah, it's a great example of where public sentiment, when it catches up to an issue like that, it can really be pushed all the way through. And yeah, 2018, 2019 were kind of the years of plastic, single-use plastic bans by every hotel, right? And as I said earlier, I'm a bit nervous about how those might be impacted by COVID response, and hopefully it's all sensible. I'd expand on Bill's point, which I think is really good. And I could see this definitely moving in that direction where every hotel has a purpose. And it comes back really to what I was saying before about purposeful travel too. And I think it'll be increasingly important for each hotel and each brand to have that to remain relevant in the future of travel. One mechanism or one tool, if you will, that we have to help make that happen, not on the design side, but in the operations side, and we build this into our management contracts now for all of our newer hotels and every hotel moving forward. So we have funding for projects at the local level. So for us, that's 0.5% of revenue, total hotel revenue, that gets set aside to be spent on local projects. And it could be, you know, the list Bill started is perfect, you know, wildlife, community support, it could be infrastructure, services, healthcare, or it could be wildlife protection, conservation work, reforestation, you know, marine biology research, you name it, but to have some kind of purpose behind it. And that's the promise, I think, that we all got so excited about from ecotourism, you know, back in the 90s when ecotourism was going to save the world, that's the promise that tourism still holds, is that people travel because they want to see something interesting and good, and they want to see authentic local culture, and people want to experience really cool wildlife and environments. And they bring money when they travel, and they spend dollars where they go. So some of that funding should be directed to preserving what makes travel great. And I think that's a trend that has to grow. And that's the promise that tourism holds.
Mm-hmm. Perfect, thank you. Yeah, and of course, speaking of wildlife, I mean, the lockdowns have provided something of a reprieve for animals, and we've seen pictures and videos of turtles nesting in number on beaches in Phuket, or dolphins swimming up the Bosphorus, these sorts of things. But tourism also funds conservation, whether that be saving rhinos from extinction in Kenya, or mitigating poaching and illegal logging in the rainforests of Southeast Asia. And especially in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak, we're more aware than ever of the dangers associated with the illicit trade in wildlife. So it's crucial for that segment of the industry to recover, and ideally in a way that balances profit and protection. And as mentioned before, both Bill and Willem are intimately familiar with the challenges of wildlife conservation in the forests of southern Cambodia, where Bill has his luxury tented camp, Shintamani Wild, and Yana Ventures operates Cardamom tented camp, not too far away, both of which support the efforts of the NGO Wildlife Alliance. So perhaps Bill, and then I'll turn it over to William, but Bill, perhaps you could start us off and talk about the best way forward for tourism to support wildlife protection.
Or tourism in general to support wildlife connection?
Well, wildlife tourism in particular to support wildlife protection, yeah.
The best way, I think, let's get the answer is pretty obvious. Let's get the borders open and let's resume. Because with this closure, we get in Cambodia, we get very little we get very little traffic, local traffic from Cambodians. Unlike Vietnam, the general manager told me yesterday that the Intercontinental in Da Nang was 40% occupancy. They're making lots of money. They're happy there, but we don't have anything on the books from local tourism in Cambodia. So that's not an option. So it's for us, you know, I have 4 hotels there and nobody's working. I mean, we didn't fire anybody, but it's a point of I just have to grin and bear it and hope that everything comes to bed fast as quickly as possible, because my pockets are only so deep.
Indeed. But when we move beyond the current the current situation and travel does begin resuming again, I mean, I imagine you would consider Shintamani Wild to be a particularly potentially successful model for the meeting of hospitality and wildlife conservation.
Well, it's going to continue to be. Continue to be the example, or a very good example, of how high-end, low-volume tourism can help work very well hand-in-hand with conservation. We're not going to drop our prices even 1 cent. And that's because I truly believe that if somebody can afford $2,300 a night, they're not going to change their mind because we've dropped it to $1,500 a night. So we're going to keep it exactly at the same rate that we have, and hope for the best.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And Willem, sorry, Willem, what about Cardamom Tented Camp, which operates on a somewhat different model, I believe?
Yeah, we are not for profit. It's a 3-party business where one of the shareholders is actually Wildlife Alliance, so it's the NGO that has the ranger stations and actually does the patrols. We are also the reason for an economic concession that Wildlife Alliance takes care of. It's 18,000 hectares. Because it's economic, they need to do something. In general, in concessions in Cambodia, that comes down to monoculture, agricultural type of business. And in our concession, it's tourism. So we provide the economic part of the economic concession, so to speak. It's very small. We have only 9 tents. So even if we wanted to make it a for-profit, it would have been pretty difficult with 9 tents. That being said, we do make profit, and that profit is going to be turned over then to the protection of that 18,000 hectares. I should also mention that the other partner in this is the Minor Hotel Group. So of course, known from Anantara Hotels and many others in the region and beyond. But we are the ones that operate it. So we are taking it a little bit differently because our price level is somewhat different from Bill Bensley's, from Shintamani Wild. It's not, I would say it is cheap, but it's definitely a bit lower. And we are going to actually, because the domestic market is the only one that we can address, and same as with Bill, we did not fire anybody of our staff. They have been very, very busy in creating new trails and supporting the rangers on their patrols, and also doing some more work when it comes to our grey water treatment and this type of thing, herb gardens and all of this kind of stuff. Same what is happening at Six Senses. But we are going to lower our price, trying to and just try if we can get some of the Khmers, the Cambodians, to go to our lodge and to see what we are all about. So become more of an awareness raising for the locals, because most of our guests until now have been Western tourists. So we are going to drop our prices. That's not going to be a long-term solution, obviously, because our whole model is not based on this. But at the very least, we can try and invite some of the locals and see what we are all about, and be more in their price level, price bracket. So that's how we are going to get it. But as soon as low season is over anyway, because July to September anyway is low season, so it's tough anyway. We have to go back to our normal rates and actually a little bit higher than that.
Okay, very good. I don't know if anyone else had anything to offer on that subject, but if not, we're down to our last 5 minutes now. I was hoping that yeah, we could maybe wrap this up. We can go around and for the travelers, the prospective travelers in our audience this afternoon, everyone perhaps could give a tip or two as to the best way we can travel better, travel more meaningfully. Maybe starting with Roy.
Well, many make personal changes, such as carrying their own bottle and utensils, or refrain from eating meat. But actually, each one can push for their organization to make organizational changes to follow sustainability practices. For example, you can influence your supply chain to be more sustainable and ask them to show you certificates. And we should remember that the travel industry is not only leisure travel, it's also business travel. So if you work in a big organization and you travel by air or another type of travel, you can request your company, for example, to offset your flight and also choose hotels that are certified as sustainable accommodations. And when you stay at a hotel or use the services of a tour operator, ask them if they are certified as sustainable, and if not, why not? Even if you don't have the time to actually go into a lengthy discussion with them, it is important just to state loudly and clear our preferences for responsible travel.
Very good. Bill, your top tip.
I'm sorry?
Your top tip.
My top tip.
We're traveling, yeah.
I've been living now in Thailand for 37 years. And this last month, when our travel restrictions and curfews have been lowered, I've been, every single weekend, I've been going out to different places that I've been wanting to go for a long time. I went to Lampang, I went back up to Chiang Rai, went to Chiang Mai, driving the car, all the dogs come with me. And this weekend we're going down to Hue Hin. It is the best time to see Thailand. So if you guys are in Thailand, go and spend some money on and go and be a tourist, because now is the cleanest time. And I went to my favorite temple in Lampang. Normally there's 10 busloads of people in the parking lot, of 10 busloads. And I went there, I was the only one. We were the only one, and it was great. So get out there and travel.
Okay, get out there and travel locally, explore your own neighborhood.
Yeah.
Shara?
I think to pick up on what a few people have said, it's not just about sustainable travel anymore. I think it's about regenerative travel. Tourism and travel has the ability to support local communities and to support biodiversity. It's not about cutting out a plastic straw, having a few corals growing on a few PVC pipes and saying you're doing, which happens in so many places. So I guess the thing is, if you're really looking to make a change, consider whether where you're going is actually leaving the place better off or not after your stay. Or are you going somewhere and making the situation worse? I think that's a good consideration.
Yeah, and where does one turn to get that information?
I think a lot of places on their websites and things, you can have a good look. You can have a good look at people's reviews of them. Yeah, I mean, I think before you travel, there are a few agents who are sending people to the right places, who've got standards. There's enough resource out there if you do your research, I think.
Okay.
You look to Destination Asia.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah. Well, we do our part, I suppose.
Yeah,
Thank you, Bill. Willem?
Yeah, a lot of good tips have been. Yeah, I just have to echo Bill. I just last week have been on a whole week road trip from Bangkok all the way to Mesai. You know, visiting sites. I've been at the White Temple in Chiang Rai. You cannot visit the White Temple in Chiang Rai without having thousands of tourists. No matter what time you go, the only one. So this is the time to travel. So in your own country, and don't forget to support, of course, local restaurants, hotels. Stay somewhere, and then choose the hotels that really do their best to promote sustainability in whatever way. I think it's very important to look which hotels are open and go there and support them. Because as hoteliers ourselves, we know you're taking a big risk to open up. You load yourself up with a lot of expenses, and you need to have those clients come in. So yeah, I'd say that. And when it comes to sustainability, how do you know which place is the right place? I mean, Roy with his certification schemes, or the certification schemes that fall under the GSTC umbrella, are a great compass to find your way to the right companies.
Very good, very good. And Jeff, last word to you.
Sure. So yeah, I've also been enjoying the less crowds in the domestic locations. Certification's important, but my tip for anyone planning travel now to travel sustainably is to make that vacation absolutely amazing. Make it fantastic. Stay longer, go deeper, experience the local community. And I think, yes, certification is important, but if, dig deeper when you're there, get to know what's important, and you will know if it's a sustainable operation or not. And if it's not, then influence them, push them to be more sustainable while you're there. And I think that's, we can all make an impact.
Okay. Well, great thoughts, everyone. Our time's up now. So thanks again to our panelists and our viewers for joining this conversation. I hope it was enlightening. And of course, if you found it useful, please do consider supporting our efforts via the link sent earlier. Yeah, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. And here's hoping for a greener tomorrow. Goodbye.